Are you ready to conquer the road, no matter what comes your way? From scorching deserts to steep mountain passes, driving in difficult conditions can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Today, we're equipping you with the tools and tips you need to drive with confidence. Hi, I'm Katina with Gypsy Wander, your guide to living full-time on the road. Thanks for joining us for this 4th episode of our Road Ready Vehicle Care Series. Whether you're a full-time nomad like me or preparing for a road trip, these tips will be invaluable. Today, we're diving into driving in different road conditions. Once again, I'm joined by the amazing Becky Witt, owner of George Witt Automotive in Lincoln, Nebraska. Becky has been a wealth of knowledge throughout this series, and today she'll guide us through the nuances of handling extreme weather, steep grades, and much more. Becky, thank you so much for being here again. I've learned so much from our conversations already, and I know there's still more to cover. When you live nomadically like I do, you drive through drastically different conditions within the same week. One day it's triple-digit heat with sandstorms in the desert, and the next you're climbing snow-covered mountain pass. So let's start talking about extreme weather. How can I prepare for driving in extreme conditions like high temperatures, low temperatures, heavy rain?
We're going to talk about high temperatures first, 117 degrees. You're going to be watching your temp gauge and making sure that that doesn't go too high.
What's too high?
Above what it normally sits at.
Okay. So if you're seeing that rise.
Right.
Okay.
Most cars, normal is going to be, if it was a fuel gauge, the temp gauge was a fuel gauge, you'd be between a quarter and a half.
Okay.
Somewhere in between. That's going to be normal for a temperature gauge.
Okay.
So wherever that is on your car, that shouldn't move.
Okay.
It shouldn't move more than a needle width or so.
Okay.
As long as you're moving, that's one situation because you got air coming through the radiator. If you have to stop, that's a second situation. There's cooling fans that have to run when you're stopped. If that starts to creep up, then if you have air conditioning, you probably have the air conditioning on. But if that starts to creep up and you're sitting still, turn the heater on.
Turn the heater on?
Turn the heater on. The heater works by taking coolant out of the engine and running it through a miniature radiator with a fan. So if you're stuck in traffic and the gauge starts to go up, it means something's wrong with your automatic fan under the hood.
Okay.
Okay. So now we've got to save the engine because if we cook the engine, we're on foot.
Okay.
So we turn the heater on. If you do this, the gauge should just drop quick. This happened to me. I'm on a trip. I'm on my way to Miami, and the cooling fan stopped working. They quit coming on at a stop, and I'm waiting for a toll booth, and I'm watching the gauge come up, and I turn the heater on, and boop, hey, right back down. We're fine. And then once we get going, we can resume normal activity. But that's how you take care of your engine, is to turn the heat on. Now, if the temp gauge starts to go up and you turn the heater on and you get no heat, you pull over, you shut it off, you're out of coolant, you're done. The heater is the highest point in the system. When you get low on coolant, it's the first one that's going to go dry. And anytime that you have zero heat coming out, and if your gauge especially has started going up, it means you're overheated.
Okay. So is there anything we can do to prepare for if we're going to be in an area that has extremely high temperatures?
Yes. There's a couple things you can do. One is to be sure you haven't had any check engine lights coming on. If you have a thermostat malfunction, for example, it can often set a check engine light for a cooling system out of range. And that means you need to get a thermostat put in. So you need to have a good thermostat, need to have a good radiator, need to be sure it's full of coolant. And then I'm gonna suggest that if you're going to be in this extreme hot weather for extended periods, be mindful of a battery, because the people that operate repair shops in areas like this say that batteries last 12 months there because the heat kills them.
Oh, wow.
So this is, I talked about batteries being a 36-month item here in Lincoln, which it is, but every area is going to be a little different. So tire condition is going to be another one. If your tires are older than 5 years old, and you're going to be in this extended heat for any length of time, you're going to want new tires because you're going to blow a tire. It's going to get too hot.
Rubber melts when it gets hot.
Well, yeah, and it gets weak. It gets really weak when it gets hot. And, not only are you generating heat and the air is hot, but the sun's baking the pavement. So the pavement might be 140 degrees. And now you're driving over it and you're generating heat and the sun's baking the tires.
Mm-hmm.
So the guys, again, that own repair shops talk about certain brands of tires, Michelin being one, is one of the best ones to have on your car to prevent tire problems and blowouts. Okay. So that pretty much covers driving when it's hot.
Yes.
Now I'm done.
Okay, now low temperatures. Driving in low temperatures.
Low temperatures. All right. So the first thing to understand about low temperatures is your grip is concentrated.
Say that again?
Your grip is affected.
The grip of the tires.
Grip of the tire on the road. The road's slicker, in other words. If you are accustomed to going around a corner at a higher speed, be aware that not only is the traction of the tire compromised because of the cold weather, but also lane markers and those wide stripes that they put down for crosswalks, those become super slick when it's cold. Oh yeah.
And you're talking about just low temperature. You're not talking about icy or snowy, just cold temperature.
Just cold temperatures.
Wow.
If you watch any racing, you will see when they're lined up for the start, the cars are swerving back and forth.
Yeah.
They're doing that to get the tires warmed up. Indy 500, you will see they're most likely to lose traction and spin out in the first 2 or 3 laps of the race because the tires are cold, the track's cold, everybody wants to get to the front. And there was a very famous case back in the 90s of a guy that spun out before they even threw the green flag to start because he got down, he had 2 tires on the white line that indicates the edge of the track.
Yeah.
Well, he lost traction on those 2 tires, and that caused him to spin out before they ever even got the race started.
I'm from Nebraska, and I didn't realize that just the cold weather, the cold pavement would make a difference. I'm thinking, well, of course, when it's icy or rainy or whatever, but just cold weather, I didn't realize that.
You learn a lot of this riding a motorcycle.
I bet so.
Especially if you have a hot rod bike and you go around a corner and you give it gas like you normally do and it goes, whoa,
Ooh,
whoa,
yeah.
okay, down here, slow down. So those are factors that can affect traction. Not to a great degree, but it's still a factor.
Yeah. Anything else with cold weather?
Yes, your tire pressure is going to go down 1 pound of air for every 10 degrees drop in temperature. If you air your tires up when it was 70 degrees inside a garage and it goes down to 0, you're 7 pounds below.
And is that okay?
Well, no. Not well. Okay, now it depends on what's really going on. If you air your tires up inside a repair shop and then you don't have a heated garage and your car is going to sit out all winter, you probably want to overinflate them to compensate. This is the new norm.
Okay.
The new norm for Lincoln, Nebraska is going to be 30 degrees in the winter.
So if we're driving through an area that's colder and maybe staying a couple days, do we need to do anything different?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
You can make yourself crazy.
Okay, so what about heavy rain? Driving in heavy rain.
So if you've got an inch of rain and you're driving through it, you're hydroplaned, you're up off the pavement. Your tires aren't gripping the pavement.
What is hydroplaning? Talk about what that is for people who just don't even know.
You ever seen them use, they call them a little boogie board. They're just a little board. You're on the edge of the ocean. You're on the sandy beach and the waves are coming up. And these people run along and they throw a board down and they jump on the board and they slide.
Yeah.
They're riding a film of water. That's hydroplaning.
Okay.
Hydroplaning means that your tires have now lifted off the pavement and you're now riding on a film of water.
And you probably can't steer when you're on this water.
You can't steer and you can't stop and you don't realize it. You're just going straight. Life's good. If you have really good new tires with deep tread, you may retain contact. If you have real thin tires, it's much easier for that to lift off. This is one reason why you always want to have all 4 tires the same on a car. If you have tires that are thin on the back, and you have new tires on the front and you go around a curve and it's raining, then the back end can just start slipping away.
Yeah.
And once it starts slipping, you're gone. I mean, you're spinning out.
So this is all great advice. Let's talk now about altitude. As someone who frequently drives in high altitude areas, I've noticed that my vehicle sometimes feels like it's working harder. Becky, can altitude change, can changes in altitude affect our vehicle performance?
Absolutely. There is no question. The air is thinner. Your engine is an air pump. The air is less dense. They're really, the only thing that there is to be concerned with is just being aware you don't have all the power you used to. You know, if it's hard, it's difficult to pass. If you're going I-70 out of Denver and you got to climb up to the Eisenhower Tunnel, you get up to Georgetown and you're about 7,800 feet and the car's going, and you need to pass somebody that's going slower. It's a job. It's a job to get around it.
Yeah.
And you don't like having to slow down because it's a bear to gain that speed back.
Anything we can do to our car that would make it easier on it?
When you know you're going to go to the mountains, the air's thinner. And if you have a plugged air filter, it's going to take all the power away. And I actually have had people tell me that their car just hardly wouldn't go. And they had to pull into some place and they changed the air filter and then they could go.
Okay, so, and we're talking about the engine air filter.
Engine air filter.
And that's a maintenance item that usually lasts 15,000 miles.
Yes.
But if we're noticing that, you know, maybe we're only at 10,000 miles, but we're noticing a difference in our vehicle and we're in high altitude, we may want to change that a little bit sooner just to help our car out.
That's a great idea. Yes.
I've seen this just a couple times last week. The Death Wobble. Do you know what the Death Wobble is? Talk about the Death Wobble.
Well, it as it pertains to a motorcycle or a car?
A car.
Okay. What that is when the car just starts shaking violently without really you doing anything. It's most common to happen when you're applying the brakes.
Okay.
And the way a brake works, disc brakes, they have a steel rotor, and then the brake pads and the caliper grip the rotor, and it stops the car. Well, now if the rotor wears unevenly or it overheats and it warps, now it's shaking like this.
Okay.
So when you step on the brakes, the steering wheel shakes. And once this starts, it gets worse and worse. Commonly, if you said, Becky, here's the keys to my car. Will you please go work my rotors? I would do a series of really violent hard stops from 80 miles an hour.
Oh.
Okay. I'd get those rotors glowing hot. And then they would warp from the heat, or they would be thinner in one spot than in another. And then that would get this started. And the hotter they get, the more it shakes. And if you don't fix it and you're on the highway and all the red lights come on in front of you, all the brake lights come on, you're gonna think that steering wheel's coming off in your hands. Yeah. That's a perfect example.
That's why they call it the Death Wobble, because you're scared to death or you're going to die.
Well, and it ultimately it affects the braking.
So if you're in that situation where you're experiencing this death wobble, what is you're driving, what should you do?
Slow down.
Slow down.
First thing you're going to do is just slow down.
I had this experience when I was going down a hill that was a very steep hill. And yes, every time I stepped on the brakes, my car would, I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to I thought I was going to die.
Yep.
But it was such a steep grade, I had to continue to slow down. And as I let off the brake, I would start to gain speed.
Yep.
And I just kept slowing down till I thought everything was going to fall apart, letting off until I couldn't anymore. Is that the right way to handle that?
I got a segment on that. Okay. So when you're going down a hill, a couple of things. The first thing is truckers will tell you, whatever gear you use to get up that hill, that's the gear you want to be in going down the hill.
Okay, so in a van, and I'm in drive.
Yeah, you got a Pernindle.
Yep.
Okay. So drive is D, then you'll have a D1 or a D2, then maybe a 2, then maybe an L. Those
Okay.
are different speeds.
Okay.
So that means if you're in, say, third, it'll go first, second, third. It won't go to fourth, won't go to fifth, won't
Okay.
go to overdrive.
Okay.
You're going to use the engine speed to slow you down.
Okay, so when should I go out of drive into one of those other gears?
I'm getting there. You get up the top of the hill. As soon as you're at the top of the hill, well, actually, you're going to put it in third to get up the hill.
Does it depend on how steep the hill is?
Oh, yeah?
Okay.
Well, I mean, look, it's a mountain. You're
Okay.
going to go up the hill, you're going to go down the hill.
Okay,
In
so
theory.
even going up the hill, we want to be in a different gear.
Well, you're going to have to,
Okay.
because this thing is so steep that drive won't get you up there.
Okay.
So as you're going up a hill, you got your foot on the gas to keep speed up. It won't go to drive. It'll downshift to the next gear, downshift to the next gear. Whatever gear that is, when you get to the top, that's the one you want to keep it in.
Okay.
That's going to help slow you down going down the hill.
Okay.
So we're going to use, first off, engine to help us slow down. And some cars have a setting. I've had several cars that had like a sport mode, and you could set it on sport, and it would help it downshift sooner
Okay.
because it knows you're going down a hill. And then you're going to say, okay, well that I'm still going too fast. So what you do then is you get on the brakes firmly. You scrub 5 miles an hour, you get off, let them cool off.
Okay.
And you do that in a cycle. What you don't do is lightly hold the brakes to keep you from going too fast, because you're going to melt everything. It has to cool down. You get on the brakes firmly, scrub 5 miles an hour, get off.
Okay.
That's your cycle. And you want to avoid, if 45 miles an hour was as much as you could do going up the hill, 45 is your target coming down.
Okay.
You don't want to be pressing on the brake when you're going 80. You want to keep it at 40, because your brakes are much more effective. The slower you are, the more effective that brake application is. So you keep the brakes in their range where they work. If you went up at 40, you're going to try to go down at 40. You're going to use the engine to slow you down, and then you're going to hit the brakes at 40, scrub to 35, get off the brakes, back up to 40, scrub it to 35, and that's your cycle all the way down.
So another thing I'm curious about is battery health. Do any of these things like weather and altitude or changing grades affect our battery health? You said, based on, if we lived in Nebraska, 36 months should be our a good time for replacing our battery.
Yes.
What about all these other weather conditions? Are those going to have any effect on our battery?
Yes. Weather, severe cold will, severe hot is even more. And then how do you treat it living in your van? Because it does more now than start the van.
Right.
A car battery is called a cranking battery or a starting battery. They make deep cycle batteries. A car battery is designed to produce a ton of amps for a very short period of time. Boom. It's not something you're going to watch TV and use that. That's the application for a deep cycle battery. And
which in RVs they usually call like a house battery.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. It's designed to produce a small amount of current over a long period of time. And I would suggest that if you have a way to do so, it would be a great idea to have that deep cycle battery to run things that you run.
I have a power bank. That's what I use to, and that's charged through my alternator when I'm driving. So my battery is creating a bunch of energy to start my engine, but then that battery is maintained, that car battery is maintained by the alternator.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So I'm charging my power bank using the alternator charger. And so I'm not damaging my car battery by doing that, right?
Well, where does the power come from the power bank? What does a power bank do? Does that let you run a coffee maker?
Yep. I have 1,024 watts.
Okay.
That I can use.
All right. What battery source does that power bank use? That converts 12 volts to 110.
Yeah.
So where does the 12 come from?
Lithium ion battery.
Never use jumper cables.
Never use jumper cables.
If you can help it, don't use jumper cables. Well, why is that? Because if your car's battery's dead. And you've got, in order to use jumper cables, the other car has to be running. You don't know if their voltage regulator is proper or not. Taking the risk that it's not putting out too much current. Proper voltage should be 13.8 to 14.2. So if theirs is at 15.5, now we've got this horrendous surge. And when you hook up the cables, it blows the main fuse of the car. And now you're really not going anyplace because you just thought you were dead. You're really dead now. Even putting a brand new battery in, main fuse is blown, and here you go. So this voltage surge can damage expensive equipment. And really, I mean, really. So plus, whoever's going to have the jumper cables, assuming it's not you, is going to be somebody that knows a lot, and you're going to run the risk they're going to hook it up incorrectly.
Yeah.
The second thing. Third thing, if it's below freezing, you run the risk of a battery exploding.
Really?
Oh, yeah. This is fun. Everybody knows you're not supposed to drink the contents of a battery. Why is that? Because it's got acid in it. So a battery's got acid in it. The way it works technically is, as it produces electricity, the acid is converted back to water. So a fully discharged battery will be mostly water. Water can freeze easily. Acid can freeze, but it's got to get really, really cold. So your battery goes dead. It goes down to zero overnight. The water's going to freeze, and that's going to break the plates apart. That's going to create a crack. The batteries produce hydrogen gas when they're charged. Hydrogen is more explosive than gasoline. So now you've got a little bitty crack between two electrical plates. You put power to that. Now you've created a spark. Now what happens to the hydrogen gas? You ever see the video of the Hindenburg going up? Well, that was hydrogen gas. Boom. It explodes, and now it scatters acid all over everything. I told you that was water. It's acid enough to make you blind.
Yeah. So if we don't use jumper cables, what do we use?
Ideally, you've got a little jumper pack.
Yep.
Those are fine because they'll only be 12.6 volts. They'll never be 13. They'll never be 15. And they're the safest thing to use.
And we don't need somebody else.
No, you don't need anybody else. You are now self-sufficient. You've got your own little thing. You can go on Amazon. Ideally, you want to get the biggest mini that you can.
Okay.
And then it needs to be charged up. You need to plug it into your car while you're driving.
So don't get one and say, okay, I've got one.
Right.
And keep it in your car without charging it. Because if you have a dead battery and you have a dead charger.
Yeah, you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Pretty much.
Okay. And once you charge that, does that charge stay? I mean, we should probably check it every often.
I would suggest charging it up once a month.
Really? I charged mine when I got mine a year and a half ago, and I've never looked at it again.
See, they lose power over time.
Okay.
All this stuff does. And if you just have a habit, if you have a once a month routine that you go through, my suggestion is check all of your fluids, charge your little deal.
In our first episode, we talked about fuel grades and the options we have available at the pump. Does the way we drive affect our fuel efficiency?
Yes, the way you drive has a huge effect on your fuel efficiency. The way you drive has a huge effect. Ideally, you want to have the least amount of throttle that you can have most of the time. You want to drive with as little pressure on the gas pedal as you can. So under ideal conditions, you can go to hypermiling sites to learn how to do this, but the theory is that you're going to go a little slower up the hill and a little faster down the hill because you're going to keep the same thing. The myth, people will say, well, use cruise control, use less gas. No, you won't.
No?
Every time you'll use less gas by not using the cruise if you know how to drive that way. You have a Goldilocks throttle pressure, and if you had an engine vacuum gauge, then you'd keep between 12 and 17 inches of vacuum. That keeps you right in your high-speed band. That's where she's real happy, and that's going to be slow going up a hill, faster going down a hill, and maybe not doing 75. You'll find with a van that when you get above 55 miles an hour, your mileage is going to drop like a rock.
Even with a minivan?
Doesn't matter.
Really?
There's a reason that they had the 55 mile an hour speed limit, because the wind resistance at 55, it ramps up dramatically from 55 to 60. So if you want to play with this a little bit, you're living in your van, what the heck are you going to do? You're going to be driving. So take a tank of gas and drive 55. It'll kill you.
Yeah.
It'll kill you. You don't want to do that. You go,
Then you have to decide which, is the gas savings worth the frustration.
yeah, but you asked the question.
Yeah, yeah.
So at 55 is going to be your best mileage, and then as you go up incrementally, it's going to start dropping. And I'm going to also tell you that above 65, it really goes nuts. So you want to drive 80? Yeah, get out the wallet because you're going to be feeding the monster.
What about on my van? I have a cargo box on top. How is that affecting?
Oh yeah, that's great. That really kills everything.
Yeah, I would assume it does.
Having something on the top is going to kill the mileage as well. It also is going to make you more likely for a rollover.
Really?
Yes. Well, your weight's at the top, and you ideally you want as much weight as you can, as low as you can get it. That's your safety thing. If you're collecting rocks, you don't put them in the thing overhead.
No, I don't.
You tip. If you've got a lot of weight and it's up high and you go around a curve a little too fast, you run a risk of, I can't quite do this, and then you're at the mercy of how well does this thing handle, and can I make this curve, or am I going to go across the center line? We just need to understand the physics of the machine, and in my little hot rod car that I have, it's a race car, and when I go through a curve, I can add 20 miles an hour to whatever that curve says, and I'm going to be fine. If I'm in an empty van, I'm going to go through at the speed it says. If I'm in a van with a roof rack on it, I'm probably going to take 10 off of that, maybe 15.
Oh, wow. That's really great advice.
Well, so, if it says 45, maybe 30 is a better speed for me.
From extreme weather to steep grades, I feel so much more confident about tackling the road ahead. If you found this helpful, don't forget to give a thumbs up and share it with others who may benefit from these tips. I'm curious, what do you think so far of our series? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the next episode. We're going to be focusing entirely on tires. Until then, stay wild and free.